It's time for another episode of Ask and Ye Shall Receive Answers. This is where I take your questions on Ask G-Man video question forums and the general boards, or on Twitter, G-Man from Heck. Use the hashtag AskGman. You ask questions, I answer them the best that I can. Now this was actually a question that was asked a while ago. This is from Caliph the Pale. I apologize because I said, this is a great question. I skipped it when I do the Invincibly Supermassive Comic Book Podcast of Stuff, where I also answer a bunch of your questions from the forum and Twitter. So I told Caliph the Pale, I was like, this is a great question. I skipped it because I want to do a video on it. And then one thing led to another. Yeah, so it's been a while. So the question or the thought is, what do I think about heroes fighting other heroes' villains? So for example, Daredevil fighting Doc Ock or Venom or Electro, or the X-Men going up against Doctor Doom, which we've kind of seen. You know, this idea, they are all in this shared universe. Sometimes we see these crossovers, but you usually only see Doctor Doom go up against the Fantastic Four. But you usually see the same people. You know, Green Goblin was always Spider-Man. You know, Venom was always Spider-Man. You know, you get these heroes, and they only fight the same villains. Or the villains, this is the trickier part, the villains are always fighting the same heroes. Now, why wouldn't there be a crossover? Why would villains continue to get defeated by the heroes all the time? You think they would try, you know, we've talked about this. Why are all the villains, you know, working in New York City in the Marvel universe? You know, why are they all of the Batman villains in Gotham and so forth? So if you know what the hero stomping ground is, you think that you would try to go somewhere else. You know, when Galactus comes to town, let's just use Galactus. Galactus comes to town, who's going to be the one to defeat him? It's going to be the Fantastic Four. You know, you're not going to get Power Pack to try to defeat the Galactus. You get someone who knows how to deal with the villain. And we see this a lot. So what the villains need to try to do, they need to try to go somewhere else. Somewhere where the villains aren't around. The other reason why I really like this question is it reminds me of the Acts of Vengeance story. Now this took place, I believe, in like 1989 or 1990. And the idea was some villains got together. Of course Loki was involved, and I'm pretty sure I've talked about this before. Loki got involved, and it was like the Red Skull and Doctor Doom. It turned out it wasn't Doctor Doom, spoiler. Magneto, and like the Mandarin, and Kingpin. So, you know, all these villains, they got together, and they're like, you know, it sucks that we keep getting our butt kicked by the same people. What they decided is, they're going to be a little proactive. So what they decided is like, hey, Wizard, stop fighting the Fantastic Four, you go after someone else. You go after Daredevil, you go after Spider-Man. And so what they did is they mixed it up a little bit. And it kind of kept the heroes on their toes, and it was kind of working. But because they're villains, and because they can't be trusted and they don't get along, they can't work together because they have their egos and they all have their own goals, it didn't quite work out. But it didn't quite work out because they had to end the story that way. You know, they had to resolve the story. You can't, you know, have the villains win all the time, because then we wouldn't have comics with our heroes. But the idea, it's a valid idea. It's something that they should think about more often. And instead of just trying to, you know, rob the bank or rob the research center, maybe you target the heroes. You try to take them out, or not necessarily take them out permanently. You know, some villains would do that. Some, they kind of have their morals. They don't feel the need to do that. But what you could do is try to incapacitate the heroes somehow. Take them off the board. Then you can do all the stuff that you want to do. You know, you want to rob the jewelry store, you want to rob Target, you know, you get them out of the way, and then you can go do your other things. And by the villains uniting, which, you know, we've also seen this in DC, Villains Unite was actually a miniseries. Having these villains get together, you know, again, it shows safety in numbers. You get together, you share information, and that this is where it's hard for villains, because they're not trustworthy, they're not trusting. So you have to figure out, you know, if you're taking the Kingpin